All right, today I'm very happy to have Adam Vanderpool. He is the Director of Operations Strategy at ALTO, or is it ALTO Rides, by the way?
It's Alto.
It's ALTO. I just know it's the website's ALTO or Ride ALTO. And so, yeah, I didn't know if like you guys put that on the end to kind of clarify what exactly you were doing, but it's nice to have you on, Adam. Thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, nice to be on. Excited.
Yeah, me too. I've actually been following the company since you guys did start, um, because I thought it was, I was like, well, there's a rideshare company that's doing it with the W-2 model. Let's see how they do. And I remember you being in Texas, and I remember when you went to California, and then I was a big person. I was a big person in the argument against AB5, and I'm not a big fan of Prop 22 either. But I was kind of so one of the things I'm going to want to get into a little bit here in a little bit is how you think that's helped you, because I think it would have helped you in California having the both AB5 and Prop 22, even though they're different things. Um,
hmm
because you guys already started off with an employment model, and we've just been kind of watching what the rideshare game out there is doing, and it's just kind of tanking with this Prop 22 money and stuff. But you guys seem to be jamming. I mean, from what I can tell, it's the same vehicle every time, right? It's always.
Yep, we have a wholly owned fleet. So every vehicle is an Alto vehicle. It looks like an Alto vehicle, and you're
Yep.
always going to know what to expect.
But it's always what is it? I mean, it's an SUV, I know, but what can we
Yeah,
talk about what
so
kind it is? Or
we're using Buick Enclaves today.
okay,
We kind of rebrand them a little bit to the Altos. We put the little Alto symbol up front, and we
sure.
rebadge. Over time, we're looking to transfer over to an electric fleet, and so that's going to change. But today, we're using Buick Enclaves.
Yeah,
They're XL
I was.
cars, and so it can fit more passengers. And generally, like they're actually pretty comfortable passenger cars. I really enjoy my experience in Altos.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at them, and I have an SU. I have a Rav4, so I know what this kind of seating and all this that's like. So I'm like thinking, that's nice roomy rides, and the fact that always the same car shows up. I don't know. I remember during the pandemic, I was really impressed because I was thinking like I was seeing all these people building like air bubbles or like
hmm
containment centers for the drivers that were like home built with maybe duct tape and just the worst crafted things. And I remember that you guys had like a system of like cleaning. I don't remember if it exactly like happened directly in the car or
Yeah, I can talk about that a little bit. I mean,
okay,
we do have barriers, or kind of like custom barriers that we have dividing out the driver from the riders that we put up during COVID. We installed HEPA air filters in the car, so the same air
yeah,
filters that are in kind of airplanes and hospitals to help circulate the air. We put permasafe coating on the vehicles. As soon as we kind of found out of the pandemic, over time, we realized that may not be kind of the most effective treatment based off of things that we learned, but we just tried to jump into action, do everything that we could. In between every ride, the drivers, clean the vehicle. That's something that they've always done. Cleanliness and consistency has always been a top priority for us. But we really doubled down during the pandemic, right?
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, so I don't know if I'm trying to like focus more on LA or if I'm trying to focus more where you are in Dallas, because I feel like even though you guys started in Dallas, I mean, I was just looking and I saw where else did I see you are? DC. Um,
hmm
uh,
We're in Dallas, LA. We're over in Silicon Valley. We're in DC. We're in Miami, and we're in Houston.
okay. Yeah, it was Miami and DC that were the ones I didn't even know you were there. And so, I mean, I guess you guys are starting to move out a little. I mean, when you talk about the company, do you refer to
Mhm.
is Dallas like your not only where you work, but is that like the primary Alto business
Oh
city, or is it
no,
growing
no, not
bigger
not at
other
all.
places?
No, I mean, like headquarters is in Dallas, and that's
Right.
where we launched. I mean, Dallas is a very kind of like average market. It's one that we really wanted to kind of like prove out the system, but we're replicating in other cities, and every city is a major city for us, right? I mean, there right now we're literally in our first six, so each and every one of them is critically important to our business. We're rapidly expanding. I mean, you mentioned Miami and DC. You didn't know we were there. I mean, we launched both those markets within the last year,
Right.
and we're planning to launch plenty more within the next year.
Is Denver on your list?
It's somewhere on the list.
Oh, it is okay because that's where I am. If you didn't know, I'm in Denver, so I was just curious because a lot of most gig economy stuff and all that kind of stuff does really well here. I figured it'd be on the list, but I also was just curious. Um, so one of the biggest differences that I really want to get into that I know that that the listeners will want to hear too is that um, Alto is W2. It's not rideshare. It's not accepting rides. It's not your vehicle. It's not. So can you break down like I mean, is it like a come to work, get assigned a vehicle for the day, work a shift, or is it
Yep.
like a cab
You got
model where you're taking a vehicle
no,
home? Is it
you got it exactly right. So we have op centers in all of our cities. The drivers come into the op centers like they would come into their place of employment. You know, they sign in, they clock in, they get assigned a vehicle, they pick up a car, and then they head out on their shift. At the end of the day, they bring it back into the op center, they clock out, and then they head on home. So very much just like a traditional W-2 job in that sense.
so? I'm guessing that you guys have way more applicants than you do vehicles.
Yeah, definitely.
Like way more. Okay. Um, but at the same time, what are the requirements of a driver?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, obviously, there's going to be some kind of like, you know, very tactical requirements. Like they have to have a driver's license. They have to, you
Sure.
know, kind of be. But then, really, kind of what we're looking for, right? Like when we're screening, and I think that it's kind of like the heart of your question. We're really looking for somebody with, you know, a customer service first mentality who's really looking to provide like an excellent customer experience to our passengers. And that's really kind of like the primary thing that we're looking for, right? Like somebody in terms of like personality and like skill set, just a customer service orientation. Besides that, it means really just about like dependability, like reliability, and all the things that, you know, make a traditional W-2 employee like a great employee. You know, one big difference between Alto and kind of like the gig economy models, right, is that, you know, drivers are assigned shifts. You know, they're working in a more traditional like management structure, and so those things that make W-2 employees, you know, reliable, like reliability, consistency, dependability, are also just really important to us too, right?
Yeah. Well, so I also saw that you guys do training too, which is a big difference from the gig economy
Mm-hmm.
too, because obviously you're doing the best you can to weed the specific drivers out that you want. But at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
then they have to go through your training. What is your training? Just curious.
Yeah, so once a driver kind of takes their interview, so the process coming on, if I can just like rewind a little bit forward, a little bit backwards rather, the drivers will apply. You know, we'll kind of like we'll go through their applications. We actually have an interview component where the drivers are interviewing, just like a traditional W-2 job. Should they pass that and kind of move on, we start off with virtual online training to really kind of get them to the basics, so that drivers could be, you know, doing training modules that really let them understand kind of like, you know, what it is that they should be expecting, you know, how to kind of like operate in Alto, what our standard operating procedures are. Then they come in for their kind of like in-person training, right? And so we have trainers. All of our trainers have previously been drivers, so they essentially kind of like at this point graduate up as a promotion.
Okay.
And the trainers then work with that driver. They take them out on the road. They kind of show them the ropes. They kind of go through simulation, like simulation trips, right, where the trainer might, you know, role play as a passenger, so on and so forth, to get that driver just comfortable kind of doing some things which come very naturally to gig workers who've been doing it for a long time, but, you know, may not come naturally to kind of like the Starbucks barista who's coming on, or like the front desk agent who's coming on, in terms of like, you know, using the app, making sure that that driver feels comfortable and ready to kind of like be doing that in a quick fashion, be like just interfacing with like the Alto product while they drive, not necessarily while they drive, but while they're, you know, completing their missions, making sure that they're, you know, coming forward with a customer service mentality, making sure they're driving safely. We do some tips on just kind of like safe driving, making sure that that driver is really focused on, you know, bringing that customer service experience first, and bringing kind of just like a safe, consistent ride first. They're not trying to race there necessarily, and they're
Right,
not
right, right.
incentivized by the same things an Uber and Lyft driver might be incentivized towards.
So because it's not independent contractorship, is it specifically that the driver is following the map system you want? They're doing
Yeah, that's a great point. Versus relative to Uber and Lyft, right? We just have a lot more control. The driver is going to be, you know, taking the trips that we assign to them, and they're going to be kind of like moving to the staging positions we assign to them. The drivers aren't competing against each other, right? It's actually
right.
more like a hive mind, which in a lot of ways gives us more room to optimize on the back end, because, you know, every driver necessarily can kind of just like execute on the game plan, which, you know, creates like more room for optimization.
Now, because it's done that way, and they're assigned, if a driver feels unsafe or pulls up to a location and something is happening, is there a method without them having to call in from the location to like pull away
Yeah,
from it?
so
And
we have driver support slash dispatchers who sit here centrally in Dallas, but are always available to the drivers. There's kind of like one click of the radio away. So drivers always have that kind of like constant connection to our kind of centralized driver support. Beyond that, we do have kind of like inwards and outwards facing cameras through our telematics device, which helps us kind of like monitor the system. And so when drivers are driving, it's not as if there's like a, you know, one of those like mall security rooms where like we can kind of just like see what they're doing at all times. We really are just able to pull this from the cloud should there be an incident. And so
sure.
it's really kind of a safety first like mechanism that provides drivers a little bit of extra, you know, reliability, or just like takes that off of them in a way.
So when you're talking about telematics, you're talking about like how the driver's performing too, because I'm a little familiar with it. It's like how they
Mhm.
brake, how slowly they stop coming up to lights, and it's like a constant
Yeah, exactly.
evaluation. So
Yeah, you got it exactly right. Like, you know, are they speeding too quickly? And when those things happen, right, we take that as coaching opportunities. And so again, like more of a traditional W-2 job, there's like a management structure. Like we do use these tools to constantly kind of train and performance manage our drivers. Really trying to build, you know, the greatest workforce in the rideshare industry, and, you know, create a good experience for both drivers and passengers alike through that.
so it's not like, hey, you've been speeding, driver X, you've been speeding too much. Just like Uber, you're unlike deactivated, but you're fired. It's not like that.
No, yeah,
You're trying to
yeah,
keep them. You're trying to help them.
yeah, it's like, you know, there's like any kind of managerial position, right? There's like empathy, there's like trying to like coach and build up and create, you know, just create something better.
Yeah. Um, can I ask you? I'm sure it might be different given the city, but can I ask you what the pay structure is for a driver?
Yeah, so the pay structures, it's what we really try to focus on, right, is like consistency and making sure that these folks know what they're going to get. And so that's one benefit of Alto versus kind of a traditional gig economy model. You know, you come in and you're essentially kind of like locked into your hourly wage for your shifts, and you know that ahead of time because you're scheduled for them, and you know what to expect.
Sure.
Within kind of like the day, we do have kind of like a variable pay structure depending on hours worked, but you already kind of lock in your shifts so you know what the average is for that. So for example, from potentially like a noon to 2 p.m. on Tuesday, you may be getting paid kind of like our off-peak rate, because for us that's, you know, one of the times where we have a lot less demand. So we schedule less drivers for that time, versus if you're driving from, you know, 5 to 8 p.m. on a Friday, you're going to be getting kind of like the peak rate because that is when we are the busiest. So depending on the hour of day, we do create kind of like this level of differentiation based off the pay. But for the driver, you know, that differentiation that is locked in. Like they already know what to expect when they get their set of shifts. They can already calculate like, hey, this is what pay I'm going to get for the week. So it both provides like consistency with like variability. And one of the reasons we do that is to make the system attractive for some drivers, which are also pretty beneficial to us. So you can imagine like a part-time driver who only wants to work like certain shifts, and those shifts, you know, align really well with kind of when we have high demand. And so we want to find ways to kind of like, you know, reward those folks because, you know, if you're working 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Friday and Saturday, you should be receiving kind of like pay that's differentiated based off of the business value that you're providing. But for most drivers, you know, they have a spread of hours across these variable pay rates, which ultimately lead to kind of like their mixed average, which they know beforehand.
So I was just listening to your referencing. Is it common to be 2 to 4 hour blocks of time and that's about it? Or
No, the majority of our shifts are, you know, more traditional. So like about, you know, 6, 7, 8 hours.
okay.
What there are some folks who work shorter shifts. So think about like a 4-hour shift. And what I'm trying to explain is that the differentiation in pay
Right.
provides opportunities for folks who do have flexible schedules and would like to work shorter shifts, differentiate their pay and work that shorter shift around kind of like the highest value time.
Yeah.
So we create some opportunity for those folks to specifically target the areas that are most valuable to us, which is their times with highest consumer demand. But for the majority of our, you know, drivers, and especially like all our full-time drivers, like they're working, you know, closer to 8-hour shifts.
Right. But no, I liked that. I guess I just figured everybody was an 8 hour shift with you guys kind of thing, or 7 or whatever it might be. I didn't know you worked with people to say, hey, this is high volume. If you want to just work 3, we're cool with that. Because I like that, because I think
Yeah,
that drivers sometimes, you know, to each driver his own, but I've been doing it for a long time. And, sometimes you need a break. Some drivers can't make, the
Yeah, I
8 hours
mean,
anymore without it being somewhat technically dangerous or.
yeah, for sure. And that's something that we've really worked to kind of like screen. And like when you come into the ops center, right? Like you're interfacing with kind of like management. You're talking to other people. And so one thing that we're really on the lookout for is, there have, it's potential for somebody to kind of come in, they look a little tired, and we talk to those folks. We make sure that they're okay. We kind of like vet them a little bit, and we make sure that there's nothing happening unsafe either for our passengers or for that driver, right?
Sure.
And so we want to kind of like be a barrier to that.
That's good. So, um, can you, can you tell me about like them cleaning in between and all this? I mean, is that how many is it at all? How many average rides would a driver do in like an 8 hour shift? I know that I've been doing rideshare, so it's very hard to gauge this kind of thing, but I'm just kind of curious if.
Yeah, it depends on like the day and all that. I mean, like they're gonna do, I don't know, like a dozen shifts in like an 8 hour day, maybe on average. And that's probably a mix between kind of some longer trips to the airport, right? Depending on the city, and depending on kind of like the traffic and the time of day that they're working.
But because they take every trip, they're paid for every minute that they're in the car.
Yeah, they're paid for like the hours that they work,
Yep.
not for the trips that they execute on. Like they're not there trying to kind of like optimize for,
Right.
optimize for themselves. They're helping optimize the system.
Right. They're being paid W-2 hourly, not active time.
Yeah, I mean, like the onus is really like on us as a business, right? To be, forecasting properly, to be kind of like optimizing the schedule to, and all of those things. Because let's say the demand was like a little less than we expected. Well, that driver, that's not on the driver. Like the driver, consistency is key for them, right? Like we scheduled them for these times. We said like, hey, these are the hours that you're going to work, and this is the pay that you're going to receive, and they're going to work those hours, and they're going to receive that pay.
So does every driver have like an ALTO gas card too and all like it?
Yeah. So we pay for all the expenses. I mean, like
Sure.
they're coming on, they're receiving their hourly wage, and that's like the financial relationship that the drivers have. Like there's no output anywhere. Like they're not paying for gas. They're not paying for like maintenance of the car. They do have a gas card. We actually try to do the majority of our fueling kind of like at our op center, and so we have kind of like a fueling model. But they do have gas cards when they need it. Obviously, like maintenance is taken care of, and anything regarding vehicle expenses.
Yeah, I'm guessing is a lot of the maintenance stuff done through you, right? Maybe or not or.
No, we have partners that we work with.
Okay. So I guess what is I'm curious about these membership options for now.
Mm-hmm.
I guess now I'm on the rider side. I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious about these membership options. Like, has this always been the case?
Yeah, so we actually launched with a membership only model,
Okay.
back in the day.
Because I saw you
After
can
some
also
time,
call for single rides too. You just can't pre-schedule them. And
yeah, so over time, I think like August of 2019, we launched kind of like a guest tier, which allows you to book without kind of a membership. You are, like you mentioned, blocked from pre-scheduling rides. You're also blocked from booking kind of like our peak times. And so, going back to kind of like Friday and Saturday night, those are kind of like members only times, right? There are other times a day where we're busy, where we may kind of restrict and let members go through. But that's essentially kind of like the model. Members also have severely discounted rides based off of those guests. It's generally about 30% cheaper.
so okay, so if I'm a member and I see the annual fee, I'm gonna use the annual one for example, or the family. They're
It's
both.
$99.
Yeah, it's $99.
Yeah,
Says
it's $99.
was 155. Says 99 now. So
Yeah, so it's $12.95 per month, or 99 annually. And so the discount on the annual is obviously just like $12.95 times 12, but you're only paying
right,
99.
yeah, 2 free months. But so like how much it would cost me to go from I guess let's use Dallas since you would know. Like I don't know Dallas real well, but like if you were to pick a spot and go
Yeah, so
to another place in a
the
ride
price
share, what would the price difference be if you had an membership
yeah,
with
so
Alto?
the membership pricing for Alto is roughly similar to kind of Uber XL.
Okay.
And we do have like XL vehicles. And so that's about the price range. And for guests, it's going to be about 30% more expensive than that.
Okay. Okay, but I mean, but you're getting the same car every time. It's way cleaner.
Yeah,
It's
we really focus on, passenger experience, safety, which we haven't necessarily talked about fully from the passenger side, but it's definitely there with kind of the the employed drivers. Again, the rear and forward facing cameras protect kind of like all people in the vehicle. And then we vet the drivers. There are W-2s, and so it's a little bit different experience for some passengers who are a little more discerning. Consistency, and then just again the quality of the experience, and that allows us to differentiate a little bit on pricing versus Uber X, for example, which
yeah,
doesn't necessarily have the same differentiators as us, obviously.
sure. I was kind of surprised. I saw on your FAQ, I saw, why is there a 10 to 15 minute wait? And I was thinking to myself, like sometimes it's way longer with waiting for rides. So I was like wondering why it was in the FAQ for you guys
Yeah,
that,
so
why is there a 10 to 15 minute wait? I was thinking probably because there is a wait. I don't know. Like,
Yeah, so we really aim for 10 to 15 minutes as being kind of like our standard wait time. And we're actually really focused on being very consistent about the 10 to 15 minutes. So we're actually, we don't allow the driver to get there in kind of like 2 minutes based off the system. We don't allow them to get there in like, 30 minutes. We really try to optimize the system for 10 to 15 minutes because we want to create like consistency and like habits within our customers. Obviously, where we have our own fleet of vehicles, there's only, we do have some limit on the amount of vehicles that we can have out relative to kind of like our demand on the road. And so we can't have, literally like a million vehicles in one city, right? And so knowing that 10 to 15 minutes is what we found to be kind of like the sweet spot for, hey, we find that this works for passengers as long as we're delivering in a consistent way. They can kind of learn to schedule kind of 10 to 15 minutes in advance. And for most of our passengers and like their use cases, they generally have that kind of 10 to 15 minute like advance notice before they want to go. Like, if they're going to the airport, they generally know now, just like, hey, I'm going to book an ALTO. I'm going to call about 10 to 15 minutes before I want to get there. If I'm going out to dinner, I'm going to call 10 to 15 minutes before I want to head out. But it allows us to kind of find a sweet spot between like customer satisfaction, as long as there's consistency, with just like having our business run, right? Like we can only have so many vehicles relative to our competitors who crowdsource everybody's vehicle.
and you don't find that with certain events, like I'll use Houston. I won't use Dallas this time because I do a radio show out of Houston on Friday nights, and we talk a little baseball, and I talk a little baseball with the guys down there, and obviously Houston, big baseball town, especially recently.
Mm-hmm.
So like during an Astros World Series game, you don't find that like these 10 to 15 minute wait times like start having issues, or you're having to move the fleet around and it's not really playing out.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, like sometimes with events, you're right. Like sometimes it won't play out exactly as intended. We do have a cutoff actually, and generally that's, let's say, like 25 minutes, whereby which if we're giving you a wait time that's beyond that, we're actually going to cut it off. We're just going to say like, hey, there's no vehicles available right now to the passenger, because we find that just being upfront with them and letting them know like, hey, we don't have something that's going to service you within kind of like the requisite amount of time is a better passenger experience, we found, than to kind of like give them an overly long wait time and just like totally like break the promise. And so that's one way that we try to kind of stay within that window. But generally, because we're forecasting hard, we're trying to get the drivers out for those events, and do everything that we can to meet that service promise and continue to deliver on a good customer experience.
Well, I figure if your control centers in Dallas too, you're able to move fleet. You're able to say, hey, we're really getting eaten up by the stadium, move some cars over there.
Yeah, and
You know,
one other thing that we might do is, if there is like a event that's based on a physical location, we can put up a geofence around that location, and so when passengers are kind of popping up, or
okay.
when they get there and they say like, hey, just let like it's the Astros World Series, you're at the stadium, you may experience like longer wait times,
Yeah.
and if passengers are kind of okay with that, then at least we've done kind of like our diligence of letting them know. And so we set expectations, and generally that leads to better outcomes in terms of just like feelings about the wait time.
Yeah. I mean, to me, like if you're saying it's the same as like, as like one up from an Uber X, I mean, if it was in my town, I would be taking it every time. I guess I can only imagine that you guys are doing extremely well. Is there a next, I know there's a lot of cities, but is there a next city kind of targeted that you can
Yeah,
reveal at all?
yeah, I'll give you a few. I mean, like, I think Chicago, Boston, like New York City. Just really think about like some of the biggest markets in the U.S. Just generally in terms of population, and you're going to start to get like pretty close. Really, we're targeting kind of like in our intro, like the top 20 like US metros. But there's, obviously a lot of ground to cover from there.
Yeah, and when you say it, it sounds funny to me because this is like the 142nd podcast I've done, doing the website for
Mhm.
5 years and all this. And to be honest, like I'm so used to like people these days when they're on here saying, "Well, no, we're not going to go to New York, not with those new laws going into place." But I keep having to remember, wait, you're W-2. This doesn't even
Yeah,
none of this
exactly.
stuff affects you, so it's
Yeah, I mean, like, and to your point, like, it does affect us, in a positive way in some ways, right? It's kind of like the tide shifts more and more to be kind of like W2 friendly, or leaning towards that side rather. Then we're already over there. We're already kind of like doing the whole enchilada, and
yeah.
so it's definitely kind of an advantage for us.
That's awesome. So I guess before we wrap it up here, can you tell us about the EV transition, the accelerating EV fleet, or what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, we're super excited about transitioning our fleet in 2023 and starting to move over to EV. Really, I'm personally really excited about just like the implications for kind of like environmental sustainability and some of the work we're going to do there. But
Exactly.
not only are we moving over kind of like the fleet, like the cars themselves, but we're really thinking about like how do we think about the infrastructure required in order to make this work, right? Like how much of our ops center is going to change. And that's kind of like a whole nother piece of it, which is also super interesting. Like, how do we think about, the amount of chargers we need per vehicles? How do we think about kind of like optimizing kind of like the charge time to those chargers? I mentioned earlier that for fuel, we're trying to do a lot of that kind of like on site through kind of like our fuel modeling. And
Sure.
that is, in some ways that's like pretty, it translates pretty well to kind of like this like EV future. And that's one of the reasons that we do it. Because in the future, right, it's going to be it might be a little bit harder to go kind of like just stop by the gas station, get our EV filled. And so we're already kind of thinking about that optimization and the infrastructure required to make that happen.
By next year, huh?
Yeah, so next year we're starting the transition. Well, I think that we have some pretty lofty goals and we're excited about them. And we'll see how it goes.
All right. Well, so here's what I would like to say is that if anybody is in Dallas, Houston, Los Angeles, Miami, DC, or Silicon Valley, obviously if you're doing if you're using rideshare as a service, give Alto a try. Go to ridealto.com. Their cars are definitely, I gotta say this, guys, I just gotta be honest, they're way nicer than rideshare cars. And they're roomy, they're nice. He just was talking to you guys about the pricing model, and yeah, I guess if you're a driver, same thing. Go to ridealto.com and you can find some information on there on how to maybe
Yep.
locate a job if you're in one of those cities, or you just heard some other cities that might be popping up anytime soon here. Who knows? But other,
Yeah.
go
Thanks.
ahead.
Thanks, Steve, for the kind words. No, appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah. Of course. And then I just wanted to again thank you, Adam, for coming on and talking to us. I've been following Alto for a while. I find it interesting, and I find it very interesting that you're a W-2 model, because I think that people have been very hesitant against that, but there's some people starting to rethink
Yeah.
their view on that right now.
Yeah. I mean, like we're making it work and we're excited about, creating new options for drivers. So thanks for having us on, Steve.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on. And you guys check out Alto Rides. And yeah, we'll be following you, Adam. So thanks for your time.
Thanks again.